Francisco, our September event. Thank you for coming tonight. I didn't want to go a month without having an event, since I do promise to have a monthly event. So if you haven't, how many people, is this your first time here tonight? Excellent, welcome. So that is 2%. So we're building a community here to talk about product. And I started this meetup over a year ago because of so many startup events in San Francisco. I got annoyed that people were talking about what you need to do for a startup as a company and what you need to do just for the build of the product. And from my perspective, there's a lot more that needs to happen from a strategic point of view before you start the build and after the build to guarantee the success of that product. So the idea of this meetup is to have people cross-functionally, regardless of what your title is. If you're passionate about product integrity, if you're passionate about the product being the best it can be, but also affecting it beyond the build and also wanting to know what else is required to guarantee the integrity of the product. That's what we're here talking about. Now, certainly, if there's specific things that you want to talk about, this is why we have the whiteboard. Did anyone put anything up here? So every month we have this whiteboard for people to put up there. If there's an issue you want to talk about, if there's a new position you are seeking, if you know of open positions, we address it every month. I also put up in the meetup, I love Google Forms. There is actually a form where you can fill out that you're looking for a position. And I invite everyone to link with me on LinkedIn. I have a vast network, and I'm happy to suggest to you where to go for additional education, training, other meetups. And just there needs to be this conversation about product from wherever you are. So what I have up on the screen is, so let's see, I talked about, so we do have the URL for Startup Product Talks is sfproducttalks.com. If you are tweeting, please use #SFPT. Also, I request, is anyone willing to take notes tonight? Not necessarily about what I'm saying, but when we have our great speaker. I'd appreciate if someone took notes and then handed me the notes, and I will post them. I'll post the content, the slides, the tweets, and Nick is doing a video. So that will all be available for all the people who aren't here. So can someone take notes? Okay, awesome. Then I'll ask you to email. I forgot to ask someone to do that last month. So this is a framework. In product management, it's not an official profession, although the idea of product management has been around for 70 years. So this organization, the Association of International Product Marketing and Management, said, what do we need to do? What's missing to make this a profession? I'm sure if you've been in more than one company, you've noticed that how they define product management, what they consider product marketing, what they think project management is, or what the product owner, the scrum master, all of these things are touching the product or responsible for managing the product process, but there's no agreement about what the definition is, and it's a problem because it's very hard to match your skills and qualification if you want to move from one company to another. So this organization came up, they reviewed all of the many multitudes of frameworks there are. And if you're familiar with pragmatic marketing, they have a framework. If you're familiar with Proficience, which used to be Zigzag, they have a product portfolio framework. For the past 2 years, I have been reviewing what the knowledge that exists. It seems that every thought leader decides they have a unique point of view and they need to present it as a framework. So the AIPMM reviewed all these frameworks And they did a gap analysis to give an overview. So instead of talking about product management titles or requirements, they said, let's just focus on the product. Every single product starts out as an idea and it ends up dead. And actually, it's a creative process. Anything that we bring in, that human beings create, has to go through this process from conceive to planning. What happens is we get stuck in the develop phase. Well, if you're an engineer, and forgive me if you're a programmer, look, you should be focused and excellent at that one phase. But if you want to manage the product for success, you have to be familiar with what it takes to get the product through every phase and have an overview. So you're thinking way out ahead beyond the build. So when people ask me what is product management, I've started using this slide because if you just look at, people can guess the product goes through a life cycle. Now, what I'm excited is what the AIPMM has done with this and where they're going into making this a profession. So this is actually the basic slide. Then they're delving down underneath and dividing up these phases into who would be responsible in a typical deployment, in a typical enterprise organization that has a big product management resource. They would break up product management from product marketing. And they would say, okay, who's doing the conceiving where strategy would happen for innovation would be product management and product marketing, assuming they had, more than 2 people or even 2 people. Definitely product management would drive the build. Product marketing would then get involved with getting the product out to the market and retire. Nobody ever wants to talk about sunsetting a product. And that's why we have all kinds of problems that the older version is no longer supported because there's a new version, because they didn't let the market know that the product was being sunsetted. Anyway, what they're also doing here is they're saying, look, what we mean by product isn't only a software product. A service is also a product. A product is anything that's going to generate revenue that requires going through all these phases to conceive of it, build it, and deliver it. It could be an intangible. This, for me now, I'm starting to see that this meetup is a product. One of my products in my portfolio of things that I'm spending time on every month. And I wanted to walk you through this. And then in a traditional development, now they're being very nice here, I would call this a technology-driven company that all they care about, the focus is on the build. The conceive happened because the CEO or some visionary already conceived of it. It wasn't a collaborative effort. And they launch it, and then there isn't resources around, well, how do you, once it's launched, how do you deliver it into the channels? How do you develop your distribution beyond just getting listed on TechCrunch or releasing a press release? So then what they do is, if anyone is familiar with project management, there is, and I know that Pam, do you have your PMP? But I know you're very well versed in it. So in project management, which is, they actually said, this is a profession. We're going to have a body of knowledge. It's called the PMBOK. And so they actually identified what are all the areas, the knowledge areas involved in a project. So what the AIPMM is doing is looking at each of these areas which might be a silo or a functional area in an organization and saying, how do they relate to the product? What is their input? How are they involved? I just wanted to give you an overview because it's totally relevant to introducing our speaker. Then they're taking it further down and they're saying, okay, let's identify who might be on the product team and let's identify what do they have to do at every phase of this product. And it goes pretty deep. In there, then they identify what are the actual deliverables, the thinking, and the activities involved at each phase. So and so these deliverables they may be documents, they may be business case, they may be presentations, but it always falls to someone who is a product person to be filling this in. And the engineers don't have time to do this. And I found that new product people don't even have this recognition that there's all these levels of things that guarantee the success of the product that would be helpful to be thinking of. So, so that is called the AIPMM Product Management Framework, and I'm writing a white paper about it because I've found myself talking so much about it. The AIPMM has trainings about it, and I want to show you one more thing, and then out of this community, people said, look, one night a month is not enough. Let's do a whole day. And enough people came up to me and said, let's do it. So we have a team of people working on this Startup Product Summit. So please go to Startup Product Summit, sign up. And the idea of it is that it's going to be people from all points of view of the product coming together. The speakers will give lightning talks on 5 different issues having to do with the phases that the product has to go through. And we're still in iteration. If you want to be on the team, we have some sponsors, so we know that we have our startup money to really pull this off. And, yeah.
Is that 2012 or 2013?
Oh, you know what? It is 2013. Thank you. We don't have a proofreader on the team. So that's my job, don't tell. But I found that people really resonated with being frustrated like I was, with so much focus on the startup, not enough focus on the product, and people from all pieces of the organization are interested in this. So it'll be an all-day event. And it will cost money. It will be followed by an all-day training. People have the option to do both or do one or the other. If you want to be on the volunteer and be on the team, I will put you to work. But it's really exciting, and we're kind of filling in the gaps of what the lean UX is missing. They're just talking about the design. Content strategy is really becoming a focus in and of itself. So this is everything I would have put on slides, but I didn't. I want to ask if there's any questions before I introduce our speaker. And I also want to thank everyone for showing up tonight. I have some questions. So at our last event, I'm involved in product management education. I'm doing webinars. I do a weekly broadcast. I forgot to say. I do the Global Product Management Talk, which is a weekly podcast that you can listen to live. I interview a thought leader. Our speaker tonight, Bill, has been on the show briefly, and he's coming back, fortunately. And it's on the Blog Talk radio station. We're now a top 10 of their business podcasts out of 2,500 labeled in the business category. And we're getting up to 10,000 listens a week. So it's very exciting, and I'm hearing from, it's very interesting that people who across the board internationally are very interested in information having to do with product management. So you can listen to that. I am now posting on our Meetup board every week who the speaker is. And then now on Fridays, I'm hosting webinars for AIPMM, and I'm posting those on the Meetup board. So if you're a member of the Meetup, you will get informed. If it's too much email, let me know. Again, I'm using Meetup as a way of getting feedback. I'm interested in hearing your perspective. So far, I've only gotten appreciation for informing people. I'm learning a lot about how often you have to inform people to get them to show up. So with that, if you have any questions, you can get in touch. Yes?
Yeah, I'm really sorry
This will be an all-day event. So it's instead of just one night a month, we're going to pack up to 10 speakers. There's 6 different phases that we're going to talk about that the product needs to go through from inception to completion. We're going to have 3 speakers talking about each of the phases, and we're now figuring out, will the speakers all be in the same room? Will we have different tracks? And I'm of the mind of having them do lightning talks and then interacting with the audience.
And the startup part of it, is it focused on startups?
It's focused on product, but people in San Francisco will not show up unless you put startup in the name.
Okay.
That I found through a lot of iteration.
That's great pitch.
Yeah. So again, I've been mentioning the AIPMM, the Association of International Product Marketing and Management, apmm.com. They're a great sponsor. They supply the pizza. They're very excited about this community growing in San Francisco and providing a lot of support. We're meeting at Atlassian. Nick Muldoon is my co-host of the greatest. And thank you to Atlassian for providing a great space and great beer. And ask Nick about Agile and Atlassian products. And by the way, I sent you that email. The 2 co-founders of Atlassian are now like the richest people in Australia, or they're at the top of the list for. Very cool. It's a very excellent organization. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker, Bill Reed. He is a product marketing expert. I was fortunate to meet him online. You responded to my call for speakers. And not only is he an expert in product marketing, but he gets product marketing the way it should be gotten. And even further than that, he can explain to you what it is if you don't know what it is, and also what is effective, what makes a difference. He also is a best-selling author. This is so exciting, of nonfiction thrillers. Naval thrillers, and you certainly can tell us more about that. I think it's very cool. It's not often that people in the technology world are also good writers, let alone also have another career and talent. So I appreciate you for that. And also the Aventi Group is really pushing forward in advances in product marketing. And I hope you'll tell us about your iPad, your mobile app. So please come up and take it away, Bill.
Welcome, Bill.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for being here. What? Oh, you need this.
I'm going to just switch
Okay.
it to Bill.
All right, just rip it off me.
I have 2 of them because I'm also filming them.
Oh, you are. Okay. I've got power here for you.
Oh, look at that. I love this. Thank you.
Oop. And I've got connectors. And if you could. I'll just leave you with that one. If there's anything you need, give us a yell.
Okay. Now how do I, oh, you got me plugged in. Fantastic. Okay. Fusion's, VMware Fusion. I'm not a complete Mac purist yet. Okay, well, we're bringing this up.
just wanted to kind of get a read on the audience here. Does anybody here know anything about marketing? Okay, I'm kidding. And how many people are in product, it's traditional product marketing versus product management? Okay, so what about product management, as in developing the products and so forth? Okay. And then other areas of marketing besides product marketing? So across the board? Okay, good. And I'm assuming that most everybody is in a technology company. Is that correct or no? Okay. And I may have forgotten to tell you to turn on that little switch on the audio. On the box. The red light will come on. Just give me 1 second here while I find this. Okay, I think we're going to be online here in just a second. There we go. Okay, do we have a red light on that little box? Okay, we're good to go. I'm Bill Reed. I'm with the Aventi Group. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do, but I'm going to draw some parallels here between Torpedo Marketing, which may sound like it's completely out of sync with traditional technology marketing. What the heck does a guy standing on a submarine have to do with marketing? Well, as mentioned earlier, I'm also New York Times best-selling author. This is one of my books called Red November, and it talks about Cold War submarine operations. So I'm going to parallel this because there's a lot we can learn from some of the things that's happened over the years in these circles that I've used quite extensively in product marketing. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about this evening, is how traditional product marketing is actually going away. And it's becoming a lot more innovative, and we're starting to use some ideas now that are really pushing the envelope. Okay? A little bit about me, Aventi Group Managing Director. This is a company that's been around for a little over a decade. I'm one of the founding partners. There are actually 3 of us that founded this company in a couple of decades. There's a couple of books that I've written. Founded a couple of software companies, so I've had to roll up my sleeves in a building like this and try to get a startup off the ground, but also larger companies. And what we focus on at Aventi Group is really creating straight lines from marketing to actual revenue. And sometimes we kind of get muddled up in the marketing areas. We have a lot of clients in big companies all the way down to small startups, even a lot smaller than this one, where there's just a few people. And we can sometimes get a little bit muddied up in marketing. We're trying to market. Okay, we're not here to win Clio Awards. That'd be nice. But without revenue, buildings and people in those buildings, they go away. Right? Venture capitalists don't tolerate revenue for very long because the dot-com's over now, the boom. Okay? Especially true in larger companies. You've got to start generating some revenue pretty quickly, or there's no tolerance for the marketing folks that are driving a product. So that's really what we focus on, is how do we do that through some innovation. These are some of the clients that we work with today, and we actually have badge people. I was over in the building at Semantic today. We've got a couple of people in there in the building today, helping them launch some new products. Very traditional product marketing, but we are breaking some barriers there, bringing in some non-traditional thinking and some innovation. HP is one of our largest companies that we work with. SAP, we've got about 12, 15 people that have badges in the building over there, and so on. But also a lot of little startups, a lot of little companies. One that I'm really kind of excited about, the CEO of that company sold his last company to Cisco, and he's launching a very hot new product for cloud that's coming out, and they've got 6-8 people right now, but it looks like this is really going to be an exciting company, venture capital backed. Okay, let's talk about targeting customers. So there's 3 key things we're going to talk about this evening, and this relates to Torpedo Marketing. It's a book that I'm actually in the process of writing, a nonfiction book, to relate how some of these lessons that we've learned through what might seem completely out of sync with marketing actually relates very well, okay? Targeting customers. That's what I mentioned earlier is what we are really all about. Without customers, without revenue, our companies don't survive. It's the most important thing we can do, is truly understand what customers want and deliver what they want. Then they will pay, right? We are customers. How many people ever go shopping? Anybody go shopping? Right? What do we shop for? Things we need and want. Those companies that can deliver that to us, that get inside our heads and truly understand what it is we want, they're the ones we're going to take our wallets out for, our purses out for, and spend money with them. Okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about targeting customers. We're going to go back in time to 1941 to Operation Paukenschlag. Anybody know what that stands for? It's German for drumbeat. Okay, this is actually at the beginning of World War II, and we had just gotten into the war. Okay, so right after December 7th, we're talking within a few weeks, less than a month, so it's close to the end of December, the Germans bring over 5 U-boats off our coast. Okay, and we're, hey, how are you? We got our lights on, we got ships out there running around, honking horns and stuff, and the Germans are going, woohoo! They sunk 105 ships in a couple of months. 105 of our ships down to the bottom of the ocean. What the heck does that have to do with product marketing? They targeted some customers, and they did a really darn good job of it. They knew exactly what they were targeting. They knew exactly where to go. They knew exactly what market they wanted to go after. They knew exactly how to penetrate that market, and they knew how to take down those customers. And there wasn't a darn thing we could do about it. That was the largest problem of World War II. Our president, Winston Churchill, that was the biggest problem they were trying to solve. Okay, talk about taking down the competition. Wow, they did a fantastic job of that. So let's talk about how we can target customers. And the first thing we have to understand in targeting customers is that we are marketing and we don't sell. Who sells? Anybody? Got an answer to that? Salespeople sell. Okay. So who are our customers as marketeers? Sales. That's who we need to serve. We need to empower them to be able to target customers and to sell them. So we have to understand how they think, and we have to understand what they need to succeed. Virtually every salesperson on the planet has either gone through a formal sales process, they've read one of these books, or they learn through osmosis how to sell. They learn from somebody else who went through one of these. The most popular is spin selling. This has been around since the late 80s. Neil Rackham wrote a book about it. Used by probably half the Fortune 500 today. Most of these others got their basis from spin marketing. SPIN stands for situation, problem, implication, and need. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but that's how salespeople are taught to sell. They learn through these processes. And what they learn is that there are a couple of different types of sales. There's an intrinsic kind of sale, which is more of a commodity. That might be a memory card or maybe even hard drives today in many cases. But usually it's defined by I can make the sale in one call, maybe on the phone. Door-to-door pots and pans is an intrinsic sale. That's an example. Most technology sales, definitely if they're above a certain amount, are complex sales. They require more than one call, and they require more than one decision maker, and they require a lot more effort, usually on the part of several people within the company, not one salesperson, but a team, right? Product marketing is very much a part of that. We need to empower them. So they understand they're not selling stereos, right? It's not an intruder. They're selling servers or some kind of complex product, whatever technology product that is. They also understand that it's not just Fred. It's a number of people that are going to make the decisions. They have peers, they have bosses. So when that salesperson goes into the organization, tries to sell, they know they've got several people they have to sell. And it's us along with that, right? Also, it's $1 million, not $1. We have to help them to be able to raise the value so that the value of what we're selling is well above the cost of the product. That's one of our responsibilities as product marketer, to help them do that. So the real key is we have to ask ourselves this question: are we pushing or pulling? What do we mean by that? What's the difference between pushing and pulling? Let's talk about that. Transactional selling, intrinsic buyer, pots and pans. Complex sale, a little more technology, it's what we just talked about. And then strategic selling is they want to develop a key, that's where you start getting relationships with customers and they become ongoing customers with you. That's where we want to go. That's the coup de grace. Okay. How do we raise value? That's our key goal here. How do we pull instead of push? Push is when we are blah, blah, blah. We're awesome. And we see this all the time. I can't tell you how many large companies, from HP on down, we look at the material, we look at the collateral. There's maybe a sentence or two about, sort of a nebulous problem in the world. Blah, 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 blah. We solve it this way. We're so awesome. We're fantastic. We've got 5 million customers. We own the world. That's not really how salespeople sell. Okay? They pull. They use a pull model. They ask questions. And they pull information out of the customer. Hey, where's it hurt? What kind of problems are you having? And their job in doing that is to identify a customer that's in this zone here to move them over to here. And what they learn is that customers will give them all kinds of implied needs. What's an implied need? My arm kind of hurts. Oh, well, we've got this great product that can, completely fix your arm and put it in a sling and, turn you into a zombie. I just told you my arm hurts. I don't need that. That's an implied need. A good skilled salesperson will understand that until the customer admits that it's a large problem, they're not going to sell them anything, okay? Until they get to what's called an explicit need, where the customer says, I absolutely have to reduce my server count by 50% this year. That's an explicit need, not, my servers are kind of a problem. That's an implied need, okay? So what good salespeople learn is that is not somebody we're going to sell, and if we are skilled enough, we can move people from here to there and we can sell them something. That's the key. Benefits. So we as marketers need to understand that when we write copy, we have copy written, we are typically talking about features and advantages. See this all the time in collateral. We can, speed things up by 50%, or we can reduce your time to market, or we can, reduce your backup time, whatever, right? Those are features and advantages. They are not explicit need-based benefits, okay? So what we have to do in our research is understand exactly what customers want, and when we write our copy, we put that in as an explicit need. Okay? This is very critical in terms of how we can communicate properly within our documents. An implied need. Customer statement about a problem or a situation or whatever. What we would do is do enough research to talk directly with customers to get them to state these implied needs and then really understand what the explicit needs are. What is it that you're really trying to solve? And the new mantra now is job related. What is it about your job, Mr. Customer, that we can really do, okay? That we can really help you solve those pain points. Really understand what that is. It might be job security. It might be that simple. An example would be, we really do need to improve the security that we have within our networks. Okay, well, let's talk about that a little bit more. What is the real issue behind that? Well, we don't want to have any security breaches. Okay, well, why is it that you don't want to have any security breaches? Yeah, it could be costly. All right, let's talk about that. According to Ponyman Research, the average breach can cost a company $6.6 million. Are you aware of that? Well, I knew it was high, but I didn't know it was that high. So would you say that a real key requirement you have, Mr. Customer, is to ensure your company doesn't have one security breach and costs you $6.6 million? Absolutely, that's what we need. What can you do? How does that translate to product marketing? We are the ones that are providing the tools and the collateral and so forth to help those products get out the door. We're the ones that are also talking to product management to say, here's what the product should do. Okay? That's what we need to understand. That's the problem we're solving. We are helping that customer to avoid the consequence of $6.6 million for one security breach. That's what we're doing. Okay, we're not just trying to lower security stuff, right? Explicit need. We are trying to solve that one key problem for a customer. If we focus on that, then we'll win the day. Okay? Firing point procedures. Aboard nuclear submarines, when we're narrowing in on the targets, the submarine maneuvers into position, and once we've lined up and we know who our targets are, and we're close enough that we feel like we can now actually reel off a shot, then we go into what's called firing point procedures, right? That's what salespeople do. They ask specific questions, condition questions, gather data. They're just trying to gather some data. They're relatively neutral. Then we dig into complaint questions. They're more like, hey, Mr. Customer, what kind of problem do you have? I want to discover what those problems are, needs. And then we talked about consequent questions. So a good salesperson doesn't stop with problems. A good salesperson does what I just did. Well, you want to solve, the problem of not having a security breach. Tell me about that. What are the consequences if we don't do that? $6.6 million for one security breach? What's that do? My solution costs $0.6 million, and I'm solving a problem that could cost you $6.6 million. So guess what my value differential is? My delta is $6 million. That's what we need to do as marketers to help salespeople know what that delta is, so they can then impart that to the customer. Okay? And then closing questions. They prompt them around the closing questions. What is it the sales wants? I'm going to ask a question. Years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, the CSO Council, which is a chief sales organization, they're an organization of top salespeople, did a research study. They asked a bunch of marketers like us, they said, hey, about what percentage of the leads you're delivering to your sales team would you consider world-class? Fully qualified, world-class. Anybody know what that percentage was? We want to take a guess? Marketing now, not sales. Marketing says this is how many we think. Over 60%, like almost 65%. So marketers are saying, hey, we're delivering 65% world-class. Sales asked that same question, what percent do we think? Anybody? You were close, 1.3%. 1.3%, 65%. That's a pretty big delta. Okay? That's the disconnect. So sales isn't that concerned about quantity, and that seems to be what a lot of marketers are measuring their success. So, wow, I delivered 1,000 leads to you, and sales is saying, you delivered 1,000 jerks to me. They aren't leads. They aren't even qualified. They're tire kickers. I don't even know who they are. Sales is more interested in quality. Give me one good quality person I can close and I'm happy, not 100 jerks. Okay? That's what we need to keep in mind. That's what sales wants. So how do we get there? What we're going to do is narrow in on our targets and understand who those targets are, classify those targets properly. Right? Is this a tiny little rowboat? I don't care about that rowboat. Is it an aircraft carrier? That's what I want. Cruiser, I'll take that too. Just a couple of destroyers, I'm fine with that. So we want to target our personas and go through a process. We use a process that's sales aligned. And when we do our personas, we actually iron out in here what those questions would be that a salesperson would ask. So it's aligned with a sales process, right? Complaint. Do you have a way to verify if greater than 20% of your emails are not reaching inboxes? That's the kind of complaint that we want to solve for customers. So it's from a salesperson perspective. Then we can actually create sales enablement tools using those exact questions, and the salesperson knows exactly what to ask when. Okay? This is an example of one for HP. Right? This is what it looks like. This would be, hey, here's what our environment is, what we're looking for. Here's what we're not looking for. Okay, so this is an example, again, done for HP. And then here's an example of roles. So what salespeople learn, their targets, usually come in three flavors. It's usually an influencer, a complainer, and a decision maker. And good top salespeople know this person's never going to buy anything. Never. Right? But they can provide a lot of good informational insight, and they can lead us to these people here. They also learn, if you remember our spin questions, more situational, problem type questions, etc. They ask more situational questions. Hey, how big are you? How tall are you? Are you going through any kind of changes? Are you, maybe bringing in some new data centers? How many servers are you running right now? Have you upgraded yet to Windows or whatever? So they ask all those kinds of questions that'll bore the heck out of a decision maker. So what's that mean to us? Think about that for a second. So if we were to create collateral and sales enablement tools, wouldn't we want to give salespeople the right tools so that if they are talking to an influencer, they have the materials that are appropriate for an influencer, right? Not as strategic. We're not really talking a lot about, consequences and need payoff kind of stuff, but we are at this stage talking more about, hey, what's the kind of situation you're involved in right now? What are things that are happening in your organization? Complainers are the ones with all the problems resting on their shoulders. Those are the ones that stay up at night trying to figure out how to deploy all this technology that we're developing for them. Those are the ones we want to concentrate more on problem type things. All right, so our sales enablement tools here and our collateral, etc., for these people, the things that we're saying to our messaging to those people, more about problems, okay, and how to solve them. Decision makers, fairly traditional, more strategic, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on situational kind of stuff. That'll bore them. Get right to the point. What's the bottom line? What's my ROI? Right? It's TCO, all those kinds of things. More strategic. This is what an influencer would look like, right? Maybe it's a small destroyer, right? So that's we're classifying our targets here. Okay? Destroyers are fine, but you know what? We're not going to win any wars. We're trying to sink a destroyer. Nobody's going to close an influencer. Salespeople know that. But there's some valuable things we can do. So we want to tell them that. This is an example of a sales enablement tool that you would give to the sales team to say, here's what you're looking for, here's how to recognize when you're talking to an influencer, and here's what you say to them once you've identified who they are. Here's what you do, bang, bang, bang. Okay? Here's what you do when you find a destroyer. Here's how you approach it. You don't want to sink it, go around. But the destroyer will lead you to the other fleet. Don't sink that destroyer. Don't waste a torpedo on this guy, right? Follow him. He will lead you to the cruiser and to the aircraft carrier. That's what you want to do, okay? We want our salespeople to know that that's how they target the cruiser. Okay, now we found a cruiser. What do we do with a cruiser? How do you sink that guy? What salvo do you put in there? What weapons do you use? All of that we outline here, and we say, okay, here are some of the challenges that this person's going to have. Here's how you sink them. Here's what you do. No?
Is this actually your persona document?
That's correct.
So you don't actually give this to the salespeople. You use this to develop tools for
We
them.
do give this to the sales. This is an actual example of one given to the sales teams for HP. Now, we also have another document internally with the personas that we'd use more for messaging in internal that would not go to the salespeople. It's got different kind of information, a little bit more information for a copywriter, for example. Here's how you would write that. I'm going to get into that in a minute. Okay, here's the aircraft carrier. Won't spend time on that. But the other key thing we have to understand is that what we say and what we message and how we message and what we deliver to our sales teams and what we deliver to customers is dependent upon the buying cycle. This comes from a great book by Neil Rackham called Strategic Selling. And Spin Selling is also another one that has this in it. Over here, we can actually use a bit more of a pull model, right? We're asking more questions. We're trying to pull more out of the customer, trying to understand more about their problems and so forth, because the customer is in the investigation stage. As the customer moves more into evaluating the options and differentiating us from the competitors and so forth, we're going to have a little less pull model. We're going to push a little bit more, but still a lot of pull. We're still trying to ask some questions and understand what they want, and that's what we're going to deliver to that customer. And you can even do that in collateral. You can write collateral that has questions right up front. You know, have you thought about this? Is this the kind of problem that you're dealing with? Are these the kind of consequences that you're facing within your company? Right? And spend more time, 2/3 of a white paper, 2/3 of a brochure should be more pull. You should be delving into the problems, playing up more of the consequences. It's hard for us marketing people to do that. You know why? Because we know we are causing that customer some pain. But that's what good salespeople do. Good salespeople exacerbate the pain, make that customer really feel more of that pain. And then they bring in the solution to take the pain away. Right? Over here, this is what most marketing materials look like. It's push. And that's fine when you're over here. So we do want to build this for salespeople, but understand they're not really going to want to use it until they get close to closing the customer. And then you can have all the data and the facts and the speeds and feeds and all the cool things about how great our company is and why you want to do business with us. That comes later in the sales cycle, in the buying cycle.
If I was looking at, the product life cycle, I think it was prior talk, you look at, product marketing at the front end, and you don't have a product yet built, let's say, and you're still trying to add new features, understand new markets. So in the agile Scrum world, you probably know about that, we talk about stories, and, epics, features, stories. So how does that tie in on the front end? In other words, this kind of assumes you already have a product or service to sell. So how rigorous do you apply some of the same principles earlier on in the cycle, assuming before you developed your startup and actually went after a new market, let's say? How would you apply?
And you're trying to understand what customers want and develop a product?
Yeah, yes, right. And then kind of in that agile
Yep.
world of storytelling. And I also bring in kind of the hero's myth in a way. I've heard that's a new thing, like Joseph Campbell's, like Star Wars.
Absolutely.
This article come out of this dream.
Hero's journey, yes.
Yeah, so I know maybe it's a little bit off tangent, but.
It's not off tangent, and I'm actually getting there.
Oh, really? Okay.
Absolutely.
Good.
I'm glad you brought that up.
I'm a release manager, Scrum Master, and so I got into product marketing kind of with my own startup. And so your earlier question about the audience, this is all kind of new to me in a way, but trying to relate it, at a different part of the life cycle.
Right. Back here.
Do you have any thoughts around the changing, so the buying life cycle, you can sort of nod and perspective on this, it sort of seems like it's changed nowadays. So why getting to the sales funnel before you were even in the radar, meaning you sort of have to be pushing before, you have to be content that solves problems even before you're drawing out the problem, or at least your collateral needs to be around the spectrum even before they're lead or qualified leads. What are your thoughts there?
Absolutely, that's up here. All right, so this is understanding, this is changes over time, and this is kind of a mix between the push and pull. You're still pulling here, though. The way this would work is, let's say SEO, SEM, right? So you want to pull the customers in with SEO, SEM. You can still phrase it with questions. Are you trying to solve this kind of problem? Are these the kinds of things that you're struggling with? Pull them in with that, all right? Rather than pushing at that point, saying, oh, we can do this. Pull them in by asking the question, are you trying to do this? Are you trying to do that? Are these some of the things you're dealing with? And then when they come to you, you can then move them through a qualification process. We did this for Adobe. It worked extremely well. They would pull them in with that. And then once they came to the website, we would then push a little bit by offering some kind of an incentive. And it might be some really cool information they can't get someplace else. If you will just take a couple of minutes and answer a survey for us, then within the survey, we are doing what a salesperson does. We're asking sales questions. We're pulling. Okay? Do you have this kind of a problem? Are these the kind of issues you're dealing with? These are the kind of things that you're trying to solve. We're asking some situational questions too. How big, how tall, how small, the usual stuff. But we're asking BANT questions. Budget, authority, need, and timing. Those are the four things that most salespeople are trying to discover. And if we as marketers were to deliver those four things in our qualified leads, we would go from 1.3% is world-class leads up to that 65% number. And that's how we get that buy-in with sales. We say, we're going to deliver to you BANT. Over here.
Do you have see much focus on using CRM tools to do that feedback into the marketing side of it? I mean, in terms of, I saw your forms, but I saw Aventi. Aventi has a lot of sort of low-level type sales guys that may not really know what questions to ask
Absolutely.
the customer, but you need to give the feedback so you can figure out how you get back what tool he needs, because he only has 10 minutes. Which questions he asks?
Absolutely. CRM and MRM. So MRM, Marketing Resource Management, that's like our Marketo. The one we like the best is Treehouse, which a lot of people haven't heard of, but we actually like that better. And there's Eloqua, so those are the kinds of solutions for MRM. And you would use that to form your surveys. So you write your surveys within your MRM, you bring them in, and once they go to the website, you transfer them directly over to one of those systems, call it Eloqua, and you're now asking the questions in your survey over in your MRM system. It's capturing that information into their records. And then you would move, so what you would do then is score it out. That's where you do your scoring and prioritize and qualify. For example, with Adobe, they had 3 levels of qualification. It was the enterprise class product, more of the, call it SMB kind of a product, and then the prosumer kind of product, consumer type product. And we had a very crisp formula that we could use through MRM with a lot of Boolean logic going on behind the scenes to figure it out, to say, okay, if they're this and not this, or this and whatever, then they are most likely an enterprise class qualified lead based on our BANT formula, and we're going to send that immediately over. So you have your actions within your MRM. There's usually some marketing actions you could put into play, and that'll go over to the enterprise folks into their CRM, so directly into their Salesforce.com or whatever they're using. So yes, you're dead on that one. Okay, let's move along here. Sinking the competition. This part I like the best. Watch those ships. Sink the competition. Okay, talk a little bit about sinking the competition. That is actually a picture of my dad. I wrote about in my book, Red November. True story. So this is back in the early 60s, and in Turkey, He was working for a top secret NSA outfit that was monitoring Soviet submarines. And they were switching over to this burst signal thing on board the submarines, and they lost the signals, so they couldn't find them. So he helped find them by listening to the bear who was being raised by him, and my mom is scratching on the carpet, and it sounded like this sound. So he goes running back down to the base, and he goes, oh, that's the sound. And he uncovered this signal and helped the NSA to develop this new system called Boresight, these transmission receivers, and they actually found these signals. Now, what the heck does this have to do with anything to do with product marketing? Well, what that led to was a resolution of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Hard to believe. But the Soviets brought over 4 Foxtrot submarines loaded with a nuclear-tipped torpedo in tube number 2, and we didn't know they had nuclear-tipped torpedoes. We have our, remember, our line around Cuba and all that? And we're thinking, you know, the nuclear missiles in Cuba on land. Soviets are thinking, we've got nuclear torpedoes, we can take out a dozen of your warships. We don't care about your stupid little, we'll call it the walnut line, but it was the blockade, of course, around Cuba. So President Kennedy hears about this a little bit through McNamara, who was in charge of the program, calls my dad's boss and my dad into the White House. Hey, what is this stuff? They brief him. The very next day, Kennedy sends a message to Khrushchev, and it was the coordinates of the 4 Foxtrot submarines, here, 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 and here. That evening, Khrushchev backed off, sent the ships home. It's a true story. Again, what's that have to do? Anything with product marketing. We're going to relate that. Basically, the way that relates is understanding how to sink the competition, right? It's not always with firing a torpedo. It's not always with firing a nuclear missile. It's usually by having the right information and making sure that that's delivered to the right people, okay? It's about having a technological advance over the competition, but most importantly, knowing how to exploit that properly, okay? That technology that backed off Khrushchev was put together with bubble gum wrappers. It was barely working, right? And even though there were coordinates, they were 50, 60-mile radius. And we were able to force 3 of those Soviet subs to the surface, but that almost triggered World War III because they still had those nuke torpedoes we didn't even know about. But the bluff worked. And that's what we need to do with our competition is bluff them. We need to know how to play poker. That's what Kennedy did so well in that case. He played poker. How do we play poker with our competition? I'm doing that right now with 3 clients. The competitors, they're big companies, these are my clients. The competitors are small, agile startups. And they have way better technology. Well, startups do. That's what startups are all about. How does a big company deal with that? Most big companies say, we got to drop the price. We got to compete with them on price. That's how we're going to win the game. Absolutely wrong stance. You got to bluff the competition, and you've got to maneuver around them, and you've got to find ways to properly message to the customers and sync the competition by positioning yourself in a different mode to your customer. Okay, so they understand that you have what they really need. So what this shows is that for content marketing, from this recent study, 2012 B2B content marketing, the goals are increase awareness and leads for customers, right? The key here is articles is one of the key things that we communicate with, and we're increasing our content spending mostly on these kinds of articles. So that's what most of us marketers are thinking that we need to do, okay? The biggest challenge that we're having is engaging content. We're not syncing the competition because we're not engaging the competition and educating them properly. And that's what nimble startups do so well. They know how to deliver a message with 4 simple things in it, the coordinates of the 4 Foxtrot submarines. Sometimes that's all it takes to win World War III. Okay? The models that we need to use in order to communicate really effectively, this is one from Success, the Success model. The Heath brothers wrote a couple of really great books, if you've never heard of these books before. But they talk about this success principle. And really, really smart stuff here. Simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional stories. So remember the stories? Stories sell. Facts tell, stories sell. Stories are the key. We've got to tell stories. And then, again, using back to our spin model, we use 6 C's, but it aligns with a proper sales model. So in a sales fashion, we tell a story, but in the way a salesperson sells. So we start the story off with, here's the kind of the situation the customer's in. And what we actually do, we have this thing called tech thrillers we write. I'll tell you about it in a minute, but we tell a story through that, using the sales flow process and using these principles. So in a white paper, that's how we would do it. Oh, didn't I just mention tech thrillers? So engaging content, right, backed by psychological research. So we've done a lot of research on what psychologically will compel customers and people, so we understand a little bit more about their personalities that we're writing to, so that we can actually customize the content. I'll get into that in a minute. And we also do reading research. We know that some customers really like, James Patterson kind of novel where it's bam, 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 really fast. 8-page chapters, really short paragraphs, really succinct word, very minimalist, versus more literary, Jane Austen, flowery, and all kinds of wonderful prose that goes into that. Some people love that. So how do we not bore someone, or how do we, truly please someone? We don't unless we customize the content. And then the techniques. Motivate the customers through the techniques by telling these stories properly. Customization is the key. So this is, again, another study by 2012 B2B content marketing study, folks. And what we're finding is that most marketers understand they have to profile the individual decision makers and customize the content for those folks. You don't want to say the same thing to a decision maker in New York that you would to an influencer at an oil and gas company in Houston, Texas. Completely different messages to those people. So one size does not fit all and cannot fit all. You need to customize. What we've done to do that is a vector app. There's lots of different ways you can do that. You can actually do it with MRM. There are ways you could do that using some actions and rules. Set that up. We actually have developed a customized app that walks customers through, this one for HP, and you kind of drag and drop things over and they interact with it, and we ask them questions that a salesperson would ask. Hey, where does it hurt? BAT formula type questions. Do you have authority? What are kind of the things you're dealing with? What are some of the budget issues that you might have? What are the needs and your timing and so on? But we also, at that point, really understand the personality and profile they have as well. So we ask them questions around their personality type, and we ask them questions around their preferences, like the reading preferences. Do you like the minimalist kind of thing or the Jane Austen kind of thing? And then you can customize the content. Right? So this would be Nancy. She's got some authority. She's got needs for mission critical servers, interest in virtualization. Her personality is more competent and efficient. She's told us that through answering these questions in our little mobile application. And she prefers more of a narrative technical kind of collateral. No?
Sorry, Bill. So the gentleman down the back mentioned that a lot of people these days, buyers, are making that decision or finding out a lot more information via the web.
Right.
But on the internet, it's not Nancy Taylor. It's, we don't know who it is. So how do we tailor that content if we don't know? Like, have you seen any companies that are doing that well, and how do they approach that?
Yeah, so I mentioned the example of Adobe. So what you would do is you've got the one-size-fits-all content for the folks that just aren't going to take your survey. You're just going to have to do that. There's no way around that. But for that universe that takes the survey, these are the kinds of questions you would ask. In our case, we have web surveys, and then they can download the app. And we get a lot of people downloading the app just because it's kind of cool and fun and something new. Right?
So go to the Adobe site and buy something, one of the CS kits, and you'll watch how they walk you through profiling you in a very subtle way. Find out whether you're an individual consumer, or you call pro consumer, somebody who works at home.
Exactly.
Whether you're working in a larger organization, one of the things we'll ask you is, how many units are you going to buy? Because we want to make sure if you qualify for a discount, you get it. Well, of course, you're going to answer that question. But just go through it. And at the end, you can opt out and not buy anything.
Yeah.
But you'll be able to see how they profile you because, in the old days, they only sold through stores boxware, and now they're going like Apple where they're trying to sell direct and cut the channel completely out of the process. But it'll give you an idea how they profile you and how it works.
Yeah, I wonder who developed that for them.
We will follow up. For an upgrade.
Yeah, thank you very much for plugging us, for having done that for them. But in any case, yes, that's correct. That's what they do now. That is part of this process that Adobe does. And once we know that, then we can customize the content. So you can't customize the content unless you can get that information from the customer. But there are subtle ways that you can do that. And again, we're using pull. Right? We're pulling that information out of the customer as we're going through that. So when you go to the Adobe site now, instead of being pushed at, we now pull. We're asking these questions. And through that question process, we can then develop customized content for you. So this is Nancy, right? She's interested in this, so this is what we deliver to her. She gets a little different content than Bob. Okay, Bob is more of a complainer type. He's, deployment decisions. He's more in the deployment area. He's more interested in disaster recovery. He's got a little bit different, so we're going to message to him different because he's more of a strong assertive type, right? So if you go back here, see this here? I want to work with partners who are competent, efficient, and adaptive. When you look over here, oops, too far here. I want to work with partners who are respected, prominent, and decisive. Those words can be critical to selling to a customer, along with the sales enablement tools. So we would send the sales enablement tools to Charlie, who's the salesperson, and we would let Charlie know that when you're talking to Bob, the last thing you want to do, because Bob is very much a control kind of guy, control freak, you don't want to say, we can take over complete control of your data center. Bad idea. Bob's going to go, no, thank you. I don't think I want to do business with HP. Okay? So he gets different kind of information, right? And they each get different kind of information. Navigating channels. Here's where we're going to conclude. And we're going to wrap up here in the next 15 minutes. October 1971, Ivy Bell's missions. Anybody ever hear of Ivy Bell's? The most dangerous, daring, and decorated missions ever conducted underwater. Ever conducted underwater. What we discovered was that the Soviets had a communication cable running between Petropavlovsk and Vladivostok, their two main submarine bases, through the Sea of Okhotsk. And they were just communicating openly on this because it was at 400 feet deep, and they figured nobody can go there and tap our communication cable. Well, that's exactly what these missions did. So they started off with these clunky submarines. This was one of the first nuclear submarines ever built, the Halibut. And it had this thing called a bat cave in the front, which was kind of kludgy, and that's where they shoved these divers in with these pieces of equipment and so forth, and they went on these Ivy Bell's missions. So they went out to the Sea of Okhotsk down at 400 feet. The divers go out, trudging along, and they pull the signals via induction off these cables into equipment inside the submarine, and now we're thinking, oh, we get all this treasure trove of information. Wrong. They get back, and it's cacophony. Unintelligible. There's all these signals running through there, and they hadn't split them out properly. They hadn't given the technicians the proper equipment. They hadn't given the divers the proper equipment to pull off the signals properly, and there's all kind of static and all kinds of garbage. They spent millions of dollars, 2 missions, and risked lives and possibly even starting a world war with the Soviets because we're a mile off their coast when we're doing this. and they get back with garbage. Why? They had bad sales enablement tools. They didn't equip their field properly. They didn't understand their market. They didn't know their customers, what they were trying to do. Let's just go out there and get the signals, right? How many times have we seen that happen in companies? Let's just go run out there and do a promotion.
It was your dad and my dad. My dad worked in Canada too.
There you go.
From the GE.
Excellent.
So
We'll
that's why
talk.
dads didn't help too much.
Yeah. We'll definitely talk. So how did they solve that problem? So the NSA finally figured out that what they needed to do was to have proper containers. So these were basically made to look like a rescue vehicle, and the divers would be up here in the front, and they would enter in through here, and they had the proper equipment. And then inside, the spooks, or technicians as they called them, had the proper signal equipment. They gave their field sales people the right enablement tools. They understood what they were trying to do, and they equipped the people that were going into the field. And now, when they get out there, they built this thing here, plutonium-238 reactor inside this thing that could pick off 100 signals at once and wrap around the cables, the right kinds of equipment for them, the right kinds of submarines. This was the Parche, the most decorated vessel in history, not just submarine, and they were very successful, right? What can we learn from that? Well, we need to understand that we need to do things like match partners properly, understand the process better, ensure that we are matching the right partners, and equip our salespeople with the right enablement tools, giving them empowerment. So not just sales enablement, sales empowerment. Okay? And that would include things like scorecards, so they can actually detail out, here's what we learned from the customer. Right? They went up to the web, an Adobe or whatever, and they gave us this information. Here's your scorecard, which is everything about that customer, everything we know about them. Customized tools, because we know this about them. Right? What we can do now is to create these tools and prepare them properly to be able to go after that customer. Right? Incentive programs, all these different things that we can do. Let's make sure we're empowering our salespeople properly. That's the true job of product marketing. Is to create the materials, promotional programs, and the empowerment so that salespeople can actually effectively go sell customers. We should always be thinking in terms of what does a salesperson need to sell that customer? What can I deliver that can sell that customer? Okay? Customization is key. That's really, and again, you can do it through a lot of different techniques. We use mobile apps and so forth, but you can use MRM, whatever it takes. Customize it. So you say, this particular customer has this kind of profile. They're a decision maker, so do the following. Approach them in the following way. This is what's going to resonate with them. Use these kind of questions. We build these whole question matrices that say, ask this question first, ask that question second, ask that question third, all the way across. So the salespersons know exactly what they should ask at any point in time, depending upon who they're talking to. That's empowerment, okay? And that's it. Any questions?
So in terms of doing the personality type indicators, I've used Myers-Briggs in my work in the past.
Right.
It's kind of hard to do that unless you have a more intimate contact. So what model are you using in terms of how you're dividing and putting folks into the different categories? I mean, flash by the screen, I couldn't look at all of them.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
You had something up there that had enneagrams and some of the others, but I'm curious which one you would think would be sort of the prevalent personality type modeling tool out there.
Yeah, OPQ 32 is one. Myers-Briggs is another one. There's several of them, but the one that we've actually found that is now becoming more prevalent and seems to work the best is the Enneagram. It had up until, I'd say half a dozen years or so ago, 4 or 5 years ago, been sort of relegated to, astrology and that kind of area. A lot of people, not denigrating that at all, but it didn't have the credibility that it does today. Enneagram, E-N-N-E-G-R-A-M, comes from a Greek word, it means 9 types. E-N-N, ENNEAGRAM. But
Classification system.
yeah, and what's transpired over the past few years because of genetics is that genetic researchers, and more importantly, neurotype researchers, neuropsychology, have discovered that there's three, they always knew there were three main neurotransmitters that all of us humans have: norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin. And we have either high, low, or medium levels of those three. That's just how we're all wired. And what they discovered is that people who are high, high, low, 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 high, basically those neurotransmitters govern how you deal with the universe, which is your personality, right? So everyone has a personality, and your personality type is directly related to the levels of those three neurotransmitters. There's three neurotransmitters and three levels. That comes out to 9. So basically what they've discovered is that the Enneagram goes all the way back to the Sufis and the Greeks, and the observational science. I mean, back in those days, we observed everything. We knew exactly what the moon was doing and every star in the sky was doing. We were more observant back then than we are today because we didn't have HBO. We're so distracted by everything today, we don't observe anything. Back then, that's all they did. That was their TV. They watched each other. And they observed that there were 9 distinct personality types. They didn't know why. They just knew it was a fact. And that's through 16, 18 different cultures, all to observe that same thing. And nobody knew why. Now the scientists are saying the observational science simply supports biology.
Have you looked at more at individual sort of clustering, factorializing by tools like SPSS that let you kind of move things that you define, on your own, and then through some survey, those tools group them together into, however, it's like, oh, it happens that the person who likes to shop and also spends a lot of money happens to be this kind of person. You guys use those kinds of tools?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can begin to, for example, you can begin to equate roles to personality types. What you're typically going to find, not always, but quite often you'll find a person with a strong controlling type personality, which would be considered an Enneagram 8, type 8. They're quite often, because of that personality type, you often find them in a decision-making role. Same thing with a personality type 3, Enneagram 3, which is more of a performing type personality. They're going to be more adaptable and so forth into a decision-making role. Whereas maybe a person with a 9 personality type, which is more peacemaking and easygoing type of personality, might take more of an influencer role, right? Or a 2, which is more of a helping type personality. They're going to be more of an influencer, like to help people. Not always, but in general, that's usually what we kind of find. And so you can begin to make some of those assumptions. We don't always like to make too many assumptions until we get more information, but sometimes you can start to see that.
You mentioned earlier that in the normal sales process, the salesperson will kind of make the customer feel the pain and then give the solution.
Yep.
Is the process any different when you're trying to do an upsell or a renewal?
No. Probably a little bit more push, because if it's a low cost, it may be a little more intrinsic, so you don't necessarily need to pull that much. But the sales process is still going to be the same, especially if it's a little bit larger dollar amount. If the upsell or the renewal is a fairly substantial amount of money, then you're definitely going to still need to do a lot more pulling. But if it's intrinsic, you can probably do a little more push.
You seem to emphasize the, getting to the need, the customer's needs and real pain points. But I've heard more of a qualitative approach to that rather than customizing the content, copy, messaging. But I didn't see any ROI, quantitative business case approach. And I'm wondering if that's, is there any role there in terms of the
Yes, absolutely. That would be within the sales enablement tools, where you would then deliver to the salesperson those kinds of tools that say, okay, if it's a decision maker, then here's the TCO analysis that you would want to use, and so on. They're going to be more interested in ROI, TCO types of tools. So here are the tools that you would use to help influence that particular decision maker. And it's actually different than a complainer, because a complainer is going to be more interested in not necessarily a strategic TCO ROI, but more the ROI in terms of time and ease of use. You know, I can lower the burden that my team might have to implement this. My backup window, you can show, you know, like a backup window going from 12 hours to 2 hours, those kinds of things, right? Quantitative in that measure is more for that person. Influencers, probably not too meaningful there. You know, ROIs and TCOs aren't going to mean a lot to that person so much. And it doesn't hurt, but it's not going to you're not going to sell them anyway. So there's not a lot you're probably going to gain from that.
So maybe I'm wrong here, but it seems like, is this a new trend? Is it you know, sort of a new approach that's evolved to sales versus? Is it fair to say that the older approach was you start with the ROI, you know, the cost benefit analysis, and because you said that at the beginning, you know, it's not faster, cheaper that you start with. That's not really hitting their pain point, their needs. You know, it's okay. What is that personal story that's really hitting them? You know, oh, it's, you know, my that security, you know, the torpedo getting through breaching the security or something.
Right.
You know, that's the real, you know, $6 billion hit every time. Versus this is going to save you all this money if you have less struggle on your website, less people will abandon your website. It starts with the abandoning of the website, right? Then the quantitative goes after that to justify it, kind of? Is that how it's kind of
It's not necessarily new from a sales perspective. So Neil Rackham wrote Spin Selling back in 1988. So that's been around for quite a while. So that you know, approach that salespeople use is fairly tried and true. And, you know, really goes back to Socrates. I mean, you know, he used to take that approach to influence people. He would ask questions like, you know, is the sun going to come up tomorrow? Well, yeah, it is. Is it going to set tomorrow night? Well, yeah, I believe it is. And it's going to do that for, you know, the next 5 years, right? Well, yeah, I believe it is. And then, you know, someday that sun is going to finally set in your case because you're not going to be with us anymore. Is that correct? Well, yeah, that's true. Well, don't you think you should buy life insurance? Right, so he would take that same approach. So it's been around for a long time.
Okay, so then the gap between 65% marketing and sales, then what, I mean, is that a new approach then? People haven't really looked at those metrics. And,
Yes, that's the.
So what's, you know, what is that? I mean, I hate to ask a proverbial question like I'm Greek and it's all about Greek. So what value are you adding here that's anything new that we haven't seen before? You know,
Well, a couple of things, a couple of key things. Number one is, in almost every case, what I've seen in working with a lot of companies is that they aren't aligning those tools. They aren't aligning the messaging. They aren't aligning the collateral with the way salespeople have been taught to sell. Right? They're using more of a push methodology for everything. You know, like I mentioned earlier, you got maybe a paragraph or even a sentence of a problem statement. No consequence statements at all. They don't follow that spin methodology, if you will, or anything like it. And then it's all push. You know, it's all about speeds and feeds, and it's more about advantages and features instead of value, which is the real benefit to a customer. Right? So they're not taking the time to say, you know, here, and even asking those questions in the collateral, might be a white paper, whatever, is this the kind of problem that keeps you up at night? Are these the kind of problems that you're having? Are these the issues and concerns that you have? And then the next couple of paragraphs, have you thought about what the consequences are if you take the wrong action or no action? Right? Could it be that you would have a $6.6 million security breach hit? You know, could it be that you get fired? You know, whatever. All these consequences that you could have, right? And then you start going into the push, where you say, you know, just approach it exactly the way a salesperson would. What if? what if there was a solution that could do the following? What if this particular scenario could be solved for you? Right? So now you've raised a value. You could say, what if the solution to this was a fraction of the cost of the consequence? Do you see how that raises the value? Right? That's solving an explicit need. That's how we need to message and communicate, and how we need to write our copy, and how we need to make sure that we're delivering tools to the salespeople.
So it's not anything new. It's in 1988 or Socrates. You could argue. It's just that people haven't emphasized the right things, or they've evolved the system.
We just haven't seen it done very often at all, and even today it's hardly done very much. And then the other real key innovation is the customization. Right? Once you know how to dig inside the head of the customer, right? Use this pull methodologies we heard earlier that Adobe now does. Once you've got that information and you pull that out of the customer, use that to customize the content they get, and use that to customize the sales enablement tools that salespeople get. All right, so
Like the Google Analytics, for example. Analytics.
crude example, but yes. But yes, that's correct.
So on the Adobe site, they're gathering, Microsoft did this, right? The cookie, where they would follow you all over the place, so they got in trouble.
Amazon does a little bit of that. I mean, we all get the emails that say,
Google just said, oh, we came with the analytics, which is the same thing.
Yeah.
You weren't doing your job.
Do you have any thoughts around creating, maybe we're kind of late, but more using that same idea to create a better product as opposed to just selling?
oh, absolutely. Yeah, once that information comes back in, I haven't spent a lot of time in this particular presentation talking about the other responsibility of PMM, or product marketing, to PM, product management, but that is to then feed that. Now that you've pulled that information out of the customers and you understand what it is they want and what they're really resonating with and what their real needs are, you can take that back to product management and say, here's what we need to build. We're missing these 3 key items that we're not solving.
As product managers, the one thing we have is a very intimate relationship with the customer in beta test. And beta test means the whole product, and that also means the literature. So a lot of times I've found that when we send out the literature as part of the product release, in the final beta, is the customer come back, and because one of the questions we asked, what's the benefit that's missing that we didn't talk about in the literature? And my favorite one was we redesigned the database. And so our backups were twice as fast. And that was not in the literature anywhere. The customer came back and said the biggest benefit I got is backup and restore when something didn't go right. Took hours, not a day. And that was in the literature. It was like 3 or 4 key things that would be really important to new customers and also important when you're trying to sell the upgrade. But a lot of places I've gone to since the literature and that aspect of it is an afterthought. And sometimes it's not even done as part of the final part of the beta.
Right.
Which means and sometimes the good example of that is the installation sucks. So that'll be a common complaint. I've actually seen them pull the product, but that's because they didn't really do the literature as part of the whole thing.
So when you say literature, you're talking about the white papers and also the installation
No, I'm
guide?
talking about, the literature that'll come with the product.
Yeah, like the installation guide, right?
Yeah, installation guide to the, why should you buy it, or why you should buy an upgrade, or the whole thing. And it's expensive to do small runs, so there's some reasons for that, but there's a big benefit to that.
Yeah, interesting.
Test the whole product that you're shipping.
Yep.
Why do you think technology companies are so resistant to market research? Resistant to market research?
Oh, market, that's a really good question. I think primarily because back in the heyday, it was we could be a little more product oriented. We talked a little bit about product oriented companies. There's a lot of traditional research that show somewhere around the neighborhood of 1 out of 5 products succeed in a product oriented company versus 4 out of 5. But back in the heyday, we could put out a technology product, and because it was so cool and new and cutting edge and all of that, we didn't really have to do a lot of marketing. We didn't really have to understand our customers so well because, you know, nobody had this really cool new PC thing or whatever it might be. And nowadays, the competition is a lot heavier. And we need to actually start thinking a little bit more like Colgate or Palmolive, right? They do a tremendous amount of research. They go through, you know, receptivity factor market research and understand whether or not the customers are resonating with it, and really, you know, do some pretty in-depth studies. And tech companies, you know, they're sort of trying to catch up a little bit, but still way behind the curve. There's a lot of engineering thinking still going on in tech companies, a lot of very engineering-driven companies. A lot of times the senior level people came from an engineering background and haven't quite put the marketing cap on. They don't really understand marketing so well. So they don't value research so much. And so even with marketers that try to get it done, they can't get approval for it. They can't get funding for it because the top engineering folks are going, what do I need that for? Just put the product out there. It'll sell. Right? But we're finding that's not working anymore.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I see. But
Yeah.
it seems like you have a broader reach set company.
You're seeing the same things we are. It's a prevalent problem. Okay, time for more beer?
Before we stop for more beer, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.